So if you guys have ever seen a whale stranding, whether that's in person or online, you'll see this real scene of desperation. You've got this massive animal lying on the beach in a completely different environment to what it's used to. Its breathing is labored, it's actually being crushed under its own body weight, and you can see in its eyes the terror and confusion. And these strandings, even for scientists that respond to them on a regular basis, still find that they're incredibly moving and incredibly emotional. But they are useful in that they tell us not only about that individual whale and its health, but how that individual whale has kind of lived in its environment at the time. But often in a country like South Africa with a long coastline and very remote beaches, strandings happen where we don't even know that they've happened. So a whale washes up, it dies. After sort of weeks, the flesh and the blubber will fall away from the skeleton. Scavengers will eat away the flesh, and you'll just get a disarticulated skeleton, so bones just kind of lying all over the beach. And now these are exposed to the sun and the wind and the salty air, and whale skeletons are very soft and quite porous, so they disintegrate quite quickly. But there's one bone in the whale skeleton that is incredibly resistant, not over months, but also over millions of years, and that's the whale's ear bone. And so the reason these are so hard and resistant is because they help the whale hear over hundreds of kilometers within the ocean. And they also grow very different to the rest of the skeleton. So they form very early in life and then they grow very slowly. And this allows them to retain some record of that whale's life. And we can access this information through a process called bone histology. So as you can see with this one, I've taken a section from the bone and I've looked at this under a microscope where you can see the fine detail of the bone. And you can see growth marks, which you can count kind of like tree rings and age the whale. You can also see the growth marks themselves, and that can tell you something about the migration and feeding patterns. You can see changes in the angles of the canals that would have housed the nerves and the blood vessels that tell you when the whale was born. You can see how much bone was grown during nursing, so the whale was still with its mother. And then you can see the change in bone when it starts feeding independently and becomes an adult. And understanding these different life history patterns with these animals gives you some indication of how they relate to their environment and the conditions in which they've grown, how they've adapted to those conditions. And so this is great because we can now assess whales that previously we don't really know anything about them because they're very hard to observe, but we can also apply this information to the fossil whales from Langebaan, which are over 5 million years old. So we can look at these bones and see how those whales adapted to that past environment, compare that to the modern whales today, and see how they differ and how they've changed. And so these ear bones give us not only information about the past and also the present, but they can help us predict the future and how whales will adapt to climate change and human pressures that we put on them and their environment.